All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Gators Online Recruiting Show. I am Keith Niebuhr. That is Corey Bender. And we had a lot to talk about because the month of January was a big visit month for the Florida Gators. They had kids on campus on several days, and February is dead. And that means they can't host visitors and the coaches can't go on the road. Two things they were able to do in January: host visitors and go on the road and see them and their families and spend time at their schools and all that stuff. Can't do either one of those things in February during a dead period. All you can do, you can keep up other communications, text, FaceTime, all that, but no in-person contact for the next few weeks. And that's significant. And we'll get into all that. But first, Corey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Keith. Thanks for having me on, man. Hope all's well.
I haven't. Thanks. I should be thanking you. This is the Corey Bender show today. Corey's got all the juice. We're going to get you up to date on all the latest Florida Gators recruiting chatter. And the first topic today is going to be the guys that we think Florida made the biggest move with in the month of January. And look, again, they had a lot of guys on campus, but this staff just came together. I mean, John Summerall was just hired a couple months ago. Some of his staff additions weren't hired until a few weeks after that. So they're just kind of getting out there, getting to meet kids. Corey, what are the early impressions the prospects are telling you? What do they think of this new coaching staff that they've been able to kind of meet, many of them for the first time? What's feedback been?
Yeah, I think the two words that come to mind are energy and determined. I know from speaking to a lot of these kids, they always rave about, John Summerall's energy. When they're up there for the Elite Junior Day about 2 weekends ago, a lot of kids that have visited in the past under the previous staff just said this is just a different type of energy around the staff and just how determined they are to win. It's no fluff. It's nothing like that when it comes to their recruiting pitches and their message to all the top recruits. A lot of them just said, man, this staff really wants to win. I mean, they definitely want to be there. And I think that's the biggest thing I took away from a lot of these kids. I mean, Florida under the previous staff, they recruited well for a while, but when speaking about Billy Napier, a lot of kids would say he's really laid back and just a very nice guy who obviously knows the X's and O's of football. But when it comes to John Summerall, it's just about his energy and just how hyped up he is. And we kind of saw it on Twitter, about a week ago when a cornerback Amari Nugent committed to Florida. You guys saw the clip at the O-Dome when he had told John Summerall he's committing, how Summerall basically pushed him 5 feet in the air and chest bumped him. And it was just a different type of energy. And I just think he's obviously eager to win at Florida. He said during his introductory press conference, this is where I want to be for the rest of my career. I want to win here. And it's just a different type of energy. And that's really kind of reflected and went on to the recruits. And I think when you look at the staff, another thing some kids have told me is how much these other coaching staff members respect John Summerall. They said when they're up there, it's just a continuity. Everyone's very close together. They respect John Summerall. They believe in his vision. And recruits are seeing that it's just one big group up there in Gainesville. And that's really, really impressed so many recruits from 5 stars down to the guys who are still emerging in the 2028 class.
Yeah, it's interesting. People always want us to tell us that the new staff is so much better than the old staff. That's subjective. It's not for us. Time will tell, right? Mm-hmm. But we can tell you from talking to recruits and other people kind of what they're saying, and that's what Corey's doing right now. So, Corey, do they like these guys? I mean, we're talking about the energy, but do they like them? I mean, is it helping? Is the energy making a difference? I mean, it's still an NIL era here. We can't forget that. It's going to come down to that for the big guys, but is this new energy? And this is what the fans want to know. Look, I mean, that's great. There's new energy. I mean, Ron Zook had new energy. With this new energy, is it translating into results? So can you see some early results, Corey, some early dividends?
Yeah, I think one coach I'll start with is offensive line coach Phil Trotwine. I think with him, I mean, there's so many guys that he's involved with. I know we'll touch on certain names later in the show, but I think that's another coach that you can just see as far as when talking to a lot of these kids on the road from doing these in-homes. I've asked them, hey, what's the message from him to a lot of these recruits is how happy he is to be back at Florida and how he wants to have the best offensive line class in the country. And I think overall, when it comes to liking a coach, many of these kids didn't have Florida on their radar, under the previous staff. They may have gotten an offer from the staff, but the presence of Phil Trotwine comes to mind right away, how he's put Florida, front and center for a lot of these top kids, not just kids who are 3-star in-state kids. We're talking about 5 stars, high 4 stars, and he's telling them, hey, I want the best offensive line class in the country. And I think he's the first coach that comes to mind. I know Bam Hardman, obviously a Florida alumni, Former player, outside linebackers coach at Florida. He's another one that I think we've been talking to guys like Frederick Ards, one of their top targets in Orlando, has said, man, like he used to be a Gator, and it just means something different. And obviously, he's like, I call him, he's like an uncle figure to me. I can tell him anything. We connect very, very well. And that's why Florida has really catapulted up my list. So I think, yeah, obviously the energy is there, but I think the way they're connecting with these kids, there's familiarity. Obviously, when I mentioned Trotwine, so it's just from the energy level, some past familiarity from other coaches at different schools, and just obviously how determined they are, and just how they can connect with these kids. I think I always say anyone could be an offseason all-star, and we say that every cycle when there's a new coach. And we'll just see if that momentum can carry throughout the fall when obviously the wins and losses matter. But as of right now, I mean, the returns have been nothing but very positive, and that's why Florida is obviously in a great spot with so many big name kids.
Yeah, that's what readers, people watching and readers of Gators Online, that's what they want to hear. Like, okay, that's great. There's a new energy, but does it mean anything? Is it going to be the same old, same old? By the way, the same old wasn't terrible. The recruiting wasn't terrible the last few years, but it certainly, I don't think you would say was elite. I mean, to pat yourself on the back for a top 12, top 15 class at Florida, when that's what Florida always does and always should do at the very least, I thought was always a little strange, to be honest with you. But again, I don't want to sit here and poo-poo on the last staff. I'll let the readers and the listeners and the people watching do that. But Corey, okay, so nut cutting time here. Give me a handful of guys that UF really made a big move with in January. Like, and again, name, position, and where they're from, so people can kind of get a real overview. Just walk us through that if you could.
Yeah, I think 4-star tight end George Lamons. He's a kid out of Georgia, top 200 prospect in the overall rankings with Rivals. And right after the Elite Junior Day, he said Florida's number one. And he said Florida's going to get my first official visit. It only took about 24 hours later before he set that visit. So, tight ends coach Evan McKissick, he played a big role in that. He even told me during the Junior Day, Layman said, hey, Coach McKissick rarely left my side during the visit. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's recruiting. But when you have an Elite Junior Day, there's so many big-name kids on campus, it's hard to really dedicate that much time to certain kids. You kind of have to bounce around. But with George Lamons, he said, hey, he really left my side. That made such a big impression. And then I asked him, hey, why is Florida in the driver's seat? Like, what makes them the number one school for a kid that used to be a Texas A&M commit, all these big offers? He said, yeah, it's exactly that. Just how much love they're showing me. And I know this is a tight end near the top of the board and the guy they really like. So I think right now with Florida sitting at number one, I think that's obviously very, very notable. And Keith, the other thing with him is too, he had over 1,000 yards as a sophomore, about 600 as a junior. So it's a guy who can really stretch the field, very athletic for the position. So I know Florida fans will be excited to hear that.
Yeah, let me jump in on that, Corey. A couple of things. Evan McKissick, the new tight ends coach, we're hearing a lot of good buzz about him early on. And he's active. And I think if you're a Florida fan, you're like, gosh, he's coming from a school that maybe isn't as prominent as, he didn't come from an SEC school. He came from, is he one of the guys that came from Tulane? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. Yep. Tulane. Okay. Yep.
So, again, that's always a concern among fans. You see some of these staffs at some other schools, and this guy came from Ohio State. This is a guy that came from Tulane, and I want to say played at Troy. I hope I'm getting that right, Evan.
I believe so. Yeah.
If you're listening. So. And so, you wonder, and yet here he is. You put that, the logo changes things for a lot of guys. Some guys just have it. They're just recruiters. They're natural recruiters. And so now he's got this University of Florida logo on his shirt, his jacket when he's out on the road, and he seems to be making some good progress, some good inroads with kids. Kids seem to like him. And the other point on the tight end from Georgia, George Lamons. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah, George. Okay. I think Lamons or Lamons.
Lamons. Okay. Yeah. So you're talking about a guy that's produced all these pass catching yards. Buster Faulkner, the offensive coordinator at Florida, they're going to want dynamic tight ends. I mean, that's when you look at the NFL, the best NFL teams have dynamic tight ends. And so I thought that was interesting, Corey, when you mentioned this kid's stats. It shows you maybe which direction Florida wants to go in, like a guy that can really catch the ball and stretch the field. All right, I interrupted you. Give us some other guys that you have made a big move with.
Yeah, I think a 4-star offensive lineman, Sean Tatum. He's out of Port St. Lucie. John Carroll, one of the top offensive linemen in the state, one that's very close to the top of the board for this new staff. And right now, Florida and Tennessee are the top two. Miami's probably a third right now from what he was saying about a week ago. But I think right now Florida has some momentum in his recruitment. Offensive line coach Phil Trotwine, John Summerall, the head coach. They came and saw him at school, and the biggest thing he took away from that is how personable they are. I mean, you could talk football all day. I mean, those conversations are going to happen regardless. But Tatum was really impressed how the coaches wanted to know his family, how they actually interacted, talked about the coaches' families, and that's something that really resonated with him. He's a very high IQ kid.
Sean Tatum, we're talking about.
Sean
right? I want to make sure I get the
so,
right photo here.
Yep. Oh, there we go. Yep. That's from the school visit when they met. So they connected, and during that visit, they set an official visit. And Keith, that was the first official visit from what we knew that was getting set that early. When I spoke with them, he said, "Hey, I also have an official visit already scheduled." In my head, I'm like, "Well, excuse me, it's only January." And right after that, we just saw a bunch of official visits getting set. So I know Tatum. I mean, he raved about the staff when we spoke to him after the junior day. He's like, "Man, like, I can't wait to come back here in the spring. I can't wait to come back in April, my official." So I think Florida's in a great spot for him. So I think when it comes to offensive linemen, especially in the state of Florida, he's one to monitor. And I think another one too, Keith, is four-star linebacker Braden Gordon. He's out of Montgomery Academy up in Alabama. Right now, Florida's in his top two. Linebackers coach Greg Gasparotto is playing a big role in that. Visited him at school just days before the junior day. And then Gordon got down for junior day. And then after that, they met again last week at school. And he's just saying, Florida's like, this last visit from Gasparotto really showed me how much of a priority I am. He's about 6'4", 210. They like him at Mike, but he's a guy who could play a little bit on the edge. Rivals has him ranked as an athlete. And I asked him about that. He said, actually, last year, some schools liked me at receiver. So that's why, initially my ranking was that. But most schools like me at linebacker now. He's another one who's expecting to set an OV very soon. So I think when it comes to the linebacker board, he's one of the guys we'll probably be benching several times over the next coming months. And he visited 3 times, I believe, under the previous staff. And he said, yeah, I like that staff. But, obviously once they got let go, kind of hit the reset button. And when I got down there, I think he said, quote, yeah, this is it. Florida's one of the schools for me. They're definitely up there for me. So he's one to monitor. And I think another one, Keith, we have to mention is tight end Jackson Bollinger out of Centerburg, Ohio. A guy that visited, I think 3 times under the previous staff. I think the last time he was in attendance was for the Florida-Texas game. And, not long after John Summerall took over, they reoffered him and were able to get him down the campus again. And, OV set right now for early June. And I think it's another kid that right now he doesn't have a ranking with Rivals, but I think that will change. And he could be in that 4-star discussion. About 6'5", 240, very fluid on his feet. Really just operates like he's much smaller, but I think the main thing to take away from him is just how aggressive he is. Very aggressive run blocker, very physical, and another high IQ. Kind of almost has one of those personalities where you can almost see him become a captain one day for whichever school he would sign with. I think Florida definitely has the most momentum. We're pretty close to submitting an RPM for Florida, and I know they're in a great spot. His mom and dad are very much on board with the staff. Like we mentioned before with George Lamons, tight ends coach Evan McKissick is playing a big role in that. They've connected out the gate. So that's another one, I think, with George Lamons and I think Jackson Bollinger. I think if you have a tight end class with those two, I think any fan base would be very pleased. So I think those are the two to really keep an eye on. And one other one we'll mention.
Go ahead.
You want to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. One other guy I mentioned is defensive end Frederick Ards out of Orlando Jones, former teammate of Vernell Brown III. Had 11 sacks last year, and as many people know, Orlando Jones, they play against top competition, and this guy's explosive, man. I've even going back to the portal in this past year, Florida needs more pass rushers. They got KJ Ford on board, but he'll be a freshman, and they need more. They have a lot of edge players, but they need more guys that are purely pass rushers. I think Ards would be one of those guys. Another guy is near the very top of the board for Florida. He visited for junior day, had a great time. And then not too long after that, John Summerall and outside linebackers coach Bam Hardman visited him at school. And now Florida's sitting firmly in his top 3. He has a top 5, but he told me Florida's more in the top 3 range. Another kid who set an official visit about 5 months out. So it shows you where he is on Florida's board. But I think that's a guy from when it comes to in-state prospects, you have to really monitor closely. And I think as Texas A&M's another school, Keith, that hosted them and is doing a good job recruiting them. But I think Florida right now, if someone said, hey, you got to put in a prediction this far out, I probably would go with Florida. They're sitting in a great spot.
Okay. I talked to a source yesterday about Ards, Frederick Ards of Orlando Jones, and Sean Tatum, who's down at John Carroll in Port St. Lucie in that area. And they absolutely said, yeah, those 2 guys are at the top of the board for Florida. High priority guys. They're all in on those guys. And they feel like they got a very good shot with both of them. And we need to point out, I always have to point this out when we talk about Orlando Jones kids. Frederick Ard's head coach is Elijah Williams, who was an absolute stud on the 1996 Florida Gators national championship team as a running back. He later switched to cornerback because Florida had Fred Taylor and Terry Jackson and some other guys, and it wasn't fair to try to split those carries, Corey. So they moved him to cornerback, and he ended up being an NFL cornerback, starting quarterback in the league. So just an outstanding player, very successful coach at Orlando Jones, very good coach at Orlando Jones. And as you said, the school that Vernell Brown III played at. A couple things I want to get some items out of the way here. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button and the subscribe button down below. And obviously, Corey and Blake Alderman, who shares the responsibilities of covering Florida Gators recruiting for Gators Online, do a great job at gatorsonline.com. So make sure you check out all their latest intel. Corey, because it's a dead period, the coaches actually focus on the team. Now it's about getting ready for spring practice, spring football. But we go out on the road and we go see prospects at their schools and at camps. And we've got two big ones coming up that I wanted to point out. On the weekend of Valentine's Day, there's a rivals camp at St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale, and we'll have a couple guys there and a couple staffers there from Gators Online, and there'll be a ton of prospects. All the studs in South Florida will be there. The weekend after that, all three of us, myself, Corey, and Blake Alderman, will be at Orlando. I think it's usually at Bishop Moore, but the big Under Armour camp, and we will be able to get all the rest of the kids in the state. They will be there, and the board will start shifting because the Florida Gators, the Florida State Seminoles, Miami Hurricanes, Georgia Bulldogs, all the big schools in the country, they pay for a service that gives them data from all these big events. So they get everything, shuttle times, 40 times, everything, how high the guy jumps. And then they also get the video too. So they can really lock in on a kid and learn some things. And there are people that are going into these camps that don't have Florida offers that will come out of them within a week or two with Florida offers. And so the board starts to shift a little bit as more data, more info comes in. And then obviously a lot of those kids will visit in March, April when Florida practices. And then when Florida spring practice is over, Corey, they can go on the road again. The coaches at Florida, and they will watch high school kids practice. So, you know, these next few months are critical in the development of your recruiting class. All right, Corey, next up here, a big one. 5-star chatter. I love the word chatter, as you know, Corey. Cut my teeth on that.
Go to.
And by the way, just everybody who's leaving comments, we're going to try to get to a lot of them at the end. I know sometimes we say that and we don't. We will. We're also going to get to some reader questions, subscriber questions from our Gators Online subscribers, our great Gators Online subscribers who are always so kind to us. Well, most of the time. And once we get through these next two categories, we'll get to the questions. So we appreciate you for hanging on. All right, Corey, 5-star chatter. I want to run down the list of like 4 guys and just tell me what you think about each of these guys, because some cycles, Florida didn't sign a lot of 5-stars the last few years. There was the year with LJ McCray and DJ Lagway, but there weren't many during the Napier era, quite frankly. So here are 4 guys that we're keeping track of all the 5-stars, but 4 guys specifically. Quarterback, and we're going to get more into quarterback later, but quarterback Elijah Haven out of Louisiana was a guy that the previous staff loved, and he loved the previous staff, and you thought maybe Florida's going to get this guy. He's still talking to the new staff, Corey. He obviously knows them, being from Louisiana. But what's the latest with Elijah Haven, the 5-star quarterback out of Louisiana?
Yeah, with Elijah Haven, like you said, Keith, Florida was in the driver's seat for much of last fall. He visited for a few games. He visited kind of mid-season last year. And I think once the coaching staff, Billy Napier's staff, got let go, that's when momentum started to shift to Alabama. As of right now, I still look where Alabama stands. Okay. He has a commitment approaching in about a month or so from now. So I know Florida tried hard to get him on campus for one of the junior days, but we're unable to. So I think right now Florida's in the mix with him, but in my opinion, they're going to have to play the long game. And as you know, Keith, we'll talk more about quarterback later, but there's some other quarterback targets that are probably more realistic for Florida right now anyway. But it's obviously he's elite talent. I know Florida's on the short list. They made his final list, but if Florida wants him in the class, it's probably going to have to get him on campus later in the year, probably when he's committed to Alabama or someone else, and we'll see how it plays out. But right now, I think Alabama definitely still has some momentum.
Right. Next one, Mark Matthews, offensive tackle from Fort Lauderdale, St. Thomas Aquinas, who Blake and I are going to see, we hope, compete in a camp in a couple of weeks, although If he doesn't compete, he'll just show up. I mean, he's a good dude. This is a highly touted guy that still picks up the phone, still talks to guys like Corey. He hadn't blocked Corey yet, like most of the women did back, like most of the women did back, 15, 20 years ago, blocking both of us, Corey. Yeah. But Mark Matthews for Lauderdale St. Thomas Aquinas. Sounds like Florida's knee deep in this one. What can you tell us?
No, absolutely, Keith. I know with Mark Matthews, Florida's in the top group. He's told me they'll 100% get an official visit at some point. Number one offensive tackle in the country. As you see in the picture, definitely looks the part. One of those guys with a lot of long-term potential. Unfortunately, though, a few weeks ago, he was supposed to be at the Elite Junior Day. It was unable to. He didn't show up, and we still don't know the exact reason behind that. But he was a no-show. Some of his other teammates at St. Thomas Aquinas were there, but Matthews wasn't. So I think obviously that was a little bit of a stinger. But I think right now, there'll be plenty of opportunities to come see him at St. Thomas Aquinas here in March. I know Florida's going to do all they can to kind of keep that official visit front and center, hopefully to get that finalized sooner than later as well. But I think right now, I know Miami, that's a school not too far from his home. They have a lot of momentum. I know, obviously, our co-worker, On3 analyst Steve Wilfong put in an RPM for him already. So I think all schools are chasing Miami right now. But when speaking with them, he's been very impressed by offensive line coach Phil Trotwine, head coach John Summerall. He visited under the previous staff, I believe it was last spring, and loved everything about Florida. But Florida's always, in my opinion, been like a number 3, number 4, number 5 school for him. They've been high in his list, but not quite to the very top. So I think the biggest thing for him is getting him back on campus. It's kind of a wait and see to that point.
Okay. Next up, we got 2 more 5 stars. 5-star receiver Easton Royal of New Orleans. All right. It's hard to get the dudes out of Louisiana. Let's be honest. That is a hard state. Alabama's had some success. Texas A&M, I want to say, has had a little bit. Texas obviously got Arch Manning from New Orleans, but it's hard to get guys out. I'm trying to think who some of the Gators that have been gotten out of that state. Sorolla Palmer was one. ETN was one. I'm sure I'm missing some guys, but it's not Ernie Badeau. Some of you may remember, but it's hard, right? So what can you tell us about 5-star receiver Easton Royal? I know he was going to try to visit and it fell through. And what's the latest with him? Is Florida a realistic player in this recruitment?
Yeah, I think Florida's somewhat realistic contender, Keith. Like you said, I spoke with him on Saturday morning, just asking him if he got to campus. He said, hey, man, unfortunately, my connecting flight to Charlotte got canceled. We have to reschedule that visit. So, yeah, he didn't show up this past weekend, unfortunately. But he told us even at the Under Armour All-American Game Media Day in early January that Florida was definitely going to get an official visit. He mentioned, obviously, Texas, who he's committed to, LSU, Florida, and Miami. Those are like the 4 schools he mentioned a lot. So Florida's firmly on his radar. He's from New Orleans. Even though he wasn't going to go to Tulane as like a 5-star number 1 ranked wide receiver, but he did visit there. So he knew John Summerall. He loves obviously what he did obviously with the Green Wave, and he's excited to see him operate in a bigger conference. So there was already some familiarity in place. And even last year at one point, LSU and Florida were in his top 2 under the previous staff, and it was because of those Louisiana connections under Napier's staff. So this shows you that Florida is a school that he's always kind of had on his radar. He told me before that I've been to Florida so many times as a kid. I love being down in that state. And he obviously, with Marcus Davis, the new wide receivers coach in Gainesville, he loved what he did with Cam Coleman. They're talking a whole lot. So he's a top priority for them. He's committed to Texas right now, but as a New Orleans kid, LSU is going to be knocking on the door for much of the cycle. But as of right now, Florida's supposed to get an OV. Obviously, it was kind of a setback this past weekend when he didn't show up because of the canceled flight. But you still, I think when it comes to 5 stars, he is one of the more realistic guys that Florida's in play for.
Okay, last guy here of the 5 stars, interior offensive lineman Maxwell Hiller. He's out of Pennsylvania. Now, Phil Trotwine, the offensive line coach of Florida, just spent the past several years at Penn State. So those guys have that natural connection there because of that. What kind of position is Florida in with 5-star interior offensive lineman Maxwell Hiller? And who's the main competition?
Yeah, Keith, I think overall Maxwell Hiller, I just want to point this out too. He was offered by the previous staff, but at the time I spoke to him last fall, and he's like, hey, I like Florida, but like I said, there's just not enough to get a visit. I already shrunk down my list. And then kids don't have that many weeks in January to visit. It's like you said before, Keith, it sets up your spring and OVs. These trips in January are important to really show you what schools are high on the radar for him. And he spent multiple days at Florida, and largely because of the relationship with offensive line coach Phil Trotwine. Florida's probably in that top 5 range from what I was told. They made a huge move after the junior day. And I think overall in his recruitment, I spoke to him this morning and he said, hey, I'm going to take an official visit to Florida, but I don't have anything set yet. And I think overall, when you look at his recruitment, I mean, he has a very wide open recruitment overall. I mean, every national power you can think of, he's kind of has on his short list, and he's kind of still taking visits. I believe he had like a top 12 from the last time we looked. It was somewhere in that range. So his recruitment's fairly wide open, but I know with Florida, they're one of the schools that made the biggest move with him after hosting for multiple days. And they always say the visit high. A lot of kids, when it's the day of the visit, they say all the right things. Maybe in the few days after. It's been about 2 weeks since he visited, and he's still saying, man, like I was very impressed with Florida, and they're going to get an official visit. And I think that's noteworthy. And like I said, it's credit to Phil Trotwan. I think, like I said, we spoke to this kid on the last staff. There wasn't momentum, and it took maybe 2 to 3 weeks for Florida to really get him on campus. So that says a lot.
Yeah, they've done a pretty good job. I mean, that's the one thing I've noticed about the staff. Again, this has nothing to do with the old staff. I'm talking specifically about this staff. In a short period of time, and I think they've been able to do a pretty good job, an excellent job actually, of connecting with kids enough to just even get Florida involved. It can sort of take some time sometimes, and right now it seems like they've got them right in the running with multiple guys. All right, finally, Corey, last target until we get to questions. I told you it was going to be a 30-minute show, and now we're 26 minutes, Corey, so I'm sorry. We're going to go over. Flip targets, Buzz. Give me 2 or 3 flip targets that everybody watching should really be paying attention to right now.
Yeah, I think wide receiver Amari Stevens. He's a kid out of Chaminade Madonna down in Hollywood. I know he told me Florida's definitely going to get an OV from him.
Where's he committed? Where's he committed?
He's committed. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's committed to Miami. So that's obviously that commitment's strong. But he told me Florida's definitely going to get an official visit from him. Tennessee's another one. I think obviously we have to kind of circle back on Eastern Royal when it comes to 5-star guys. I mean, everyone wants 5 stars in their class, so I think he's one that definitely comes to mind for guys that they definitely want to flip. And I think overall, Keith, when you look at Florida's flip targets, there's not many committed guys out there this early. And I think when you look at that, it's going to be interesting because you're going to see a lot of these kids come off the board in the spring. And I think overall, it's going to be a wait and see. I mean, Florida's listed for a lot of these kids, but it's going to take quite a bit of time to kind of figure out who's really realistic and who's not. So I think when it looks overall, I think Amari Stevens, he's one that definitely comes to mind. And I think Eastern Royal, you got to mention him just because they're kind of in that top 3, top 4 range when it comes to outside of Texas. And the fact that he was going to visit right before the dead period, I think that's obviously very notable as well.
Anybody else? Any other flip guys of note?
I think right now, I mean, those are the main ones that come to mind. I mean, another one, I think there's a few other guys. I think another one you can definitely mention is probably Amari Fountain. He's a South Carolina commit, a kid out of Georgia who had a great visit for the junior day a few weeks ago. Florida pushed all the right buttons. I know Brandon Harris is doing a really good job in his recruitment, but I still think when it comes to realistic, South Carolina's in a good spot. I think another one, actually, I probably should have mentioned him at the front end, was Kamari Whitfield out of Orlando. He's a Tennessee commitment, 3-star cornerback, Keith, but I think it's a guy that's probably going to kind of move up in the rankings more and more. When we spoke to him a few weeks ago, he said John Sumrall's in contact with me. Brandon Harris, the cornerback coach. I mean, Dalen Wilkins, the Nichols coach. I mean, it shows how much of a priority he is for them. And then I think overall, I think Florida's going to get an OV from him. That's the school pushing the hardest to flip him. But from all accounts, from what we've heard, Tennessee is probably positioned really good for him right now to hold on. But we'll see. It's a wait and see. I think we're going to really know who's a realistic flip guy, I think, after the spring.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's interesting. All right, let's get to some reader questions now. We'll start with our subscribers, a few of them. Corey, you're going to have to take the lion's share of these. But I do know something about this next one. So this is from Swamp Thing, one of our loyal subscribers. He likes to mix it up with us. All right, who do we think UF is prioritizing at quarterback? There's really a couple guys we're keeping an eye on. I mean, we talked about Elijah Haven, the 5-star, but it seems like he's trending elsewhere at the moment. But Champ Mons out of Vero Beach, Florida, and Davin Davidson out of Sarasota Cardinal Mooney. Sometimes I get these schools mixed up. State champion. And 2 excellent quarterbacks. Mons has been on the boards of a lot of schools for a long time. He was hurt a good bit of last year, but world of potential. And then last season, Davin Davidson, really first year as a starting quarterback at Cardinal Mooney. Prior to that, had been primarily a baseball player. Tall kid, 6'6", 6'7". He goes out and wins a state title, and he can fling it. I mean, it comes hot off his hands. So those are two guys we're really watching. Florida recently offered Davidson. They're all in on Mons too. I mean, they like both these guys. Corey, do you think one is ahead of the other right now on the Florida board?
Man, that's such a good question. I think they're pretty neck and neck for a while. I would say Champ Mons. I mean, like you said, Keith, he's been a national guy for a few years now, reclassified from 28 to 2028 class up to 2027. But man, Davidson, man, I mean, I don't think there's a hotter quarterback right now in the country when it comes to recruiting, man. I mean, every time you look, there's a new SEC offer coming in. I know, like you said, we always see track to visits. John Summerall has been down to his school. Joe Crack, the quarterback's coach. So Florida's all in on him. And when he visited for junior day, they immediately took him to John Summerall's office and offered him. They got that out of the way right away to kind of say, like, hey, like, you're one of the guys we really want. So I think right now, they're pretty much neck and neck, if you ask me. They both got probably received the same amount of visits from the staff, but it could be, who commits first. Maybe they take two quarterbacks a cycle, but they're both very, very high. It's hard to say right now.
All right, we're both long-winded, but Corey, I'll do Davidson, you do Mons. Teams to watch for Mons.
I think with Mons, I think you have to go with Florida State, Florida, Tennessee, Ohio State. There's schools like that. Georgia's involved. So it's a pretty good mix of schools. That's why I think right now Mons is more taking his time. He's really kind of feeling out visits. Very mature kid who really wants to have all the data before making a decision. But I think it's going to be, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a tougher pull to get him in the class. I think Davin Davidson's more realistic at this point.
All right, so for Davidson, here's what I'm hearing. Miami, heavily involved, grew up a Miami fan. Their staff spent 4 hours at his school recently. The question there would be, Miami hadn't really been starting high school signees at quarterback the last few years. They're going to get in portal guys. So if you're Florida, you're going to be obviously putting that in his head. But he likes Miami a lot. And look, Miami's winning, right? So they're going to be formidable in this recruitment. Florida is very much in it. Who else? Georgia is very much in it. I would say those are three schools to watch. That next level would be Auburn and Tennessee. And if Texas offers, keep an eye out for Texas. His uncle was once a Texas baseball commit before going pro in baseball. All right, next up, Corey. This is a good question. And this one's just for you. Must get prospect this year in the state of Florida for the Gators. There's only one. Must get prospect for Florida. Who is it?
I'll probably go offensive lineman Sean Tatum. I just think I think he's a guy who's a high 4-star now, but personally from seeing him and watching his film, I think he's a guy who could kind of get up to the 5-star range. And I just think with how deep Florida's into his recruitment right now and how much momentum they have, I think he's a guy that you got to keep home. He's a guy I think he could be a multi-year starter in Gainesville. I just think from obviously his aggressive style in the trenches, you see this dude up close, man. He literally looks like a college football player. He's a big dude without much bad weight, a guy that has the film to back it up. And I think they, like we just said a minute ago, track to visit, Summerall and all of them are very heavily invested in this kid. And I just think with the momentum they have right now, I think he'd be a massive get. A linebacker, Keaton Henderson's another one, but I just don't think that's realistic. I mean, he's one of the top linebackers in the country, but Florida's kind of in that mid-range, number 5 or 6 for him. So I think I'm going to go with Sean Tatum.
All right. Yeah. All right, Corey, couple more here, and then we'll get into these are our subscriber questions, and then we're going to get to the comments here. Harvey, Derek Harvey, who played for the Gators, right, has the relative. Have you been following his recruitment?
The edge for Lakeland. You're talking about St. Anne.
Yeah, it seems like FSU might lead. Do we know anything about his recruitment right now? Is Florida going to offer him? Is it too early to tell? What can you tell us?
No, I mean, they recently visited him at school. John Summerall did, Bam Hardman. So right now an offer isn't on the table. I think part of that could be, Frederick Ards. He's a guy that's high on the board. Desmond Malpress, he's another edge up in Jacksonville. I think there's some guys higher on the board right now. That's why they probably haven't offered yet. And I think with him having Florida ties, maybe they believe this is a guy they can kind of be more patient with. And like I said, when they do offer, they can immediately catapult up his board. But right now he doesn't have an offer on the table. But if they do offer, I think Florida will probably go very close to the very top of his board right away.
All right. And I need to I didn't put who asked that question, so forgive me. That was Lando asked. No, not Lando. That was Chris Chandler asked that one, so forgive me. And the must get question was Chibo. And so sorry about that, guys. All right, Lando, I'm swamped. Has a quick question here, Corey. Do we have any idea how many defensive linemen Florida's looking to sign in the 2027 class? I always tell people when they ask this, it's usually too early to tell. I mean, we have a general picture, but like we don't know who's coming. We don't know who's going. I'm talking about next year. A guy may play well that they didn't think was going to play well, that they were going to push out, and they say, no, we got to keep. And the opposite happens. Guys want more money. So it's always a moving target. Generally, you build a team from the inside out. So what do you think, Corey? 3-4 is that sort of the basic number?
I mean, because you have Tyler Alexander down in obviously South Florida, who's emerging at the board, 6'5", 300 pounds.
Heard they like him. Is that the kid at Palm Beach Central?
Yeah, Palm Beach Central.
Yeah, I heard they like him a lot. Yeah.
Denellen, you have Caden Robinson-Vickers, who's in my opinion, one of the best defensive linemen in the state. I mean, there's a lot of dudes in this class of defensive linemen that they're kind of really heavily invested in. So on my accounts, kind of tracking the board and how much of a need defensive line is going forward. I mean, they address a little bit in the portal, but those are upperclassmen. So you're going to have to reload. I think 3 to 4 right now is probably the most realistic. I mean, there's a lot of guys, man, that Florida, the Gerald Chapman, I mean, they extended the board. They offered a kid down in Coral Gables the other day. Has a long name. I can't really think of it right now, but they're offering a lot of guys who are more the prospects. You know, this time of year, you offer a lot of guys, and then you see if they rise up the board or maybe they slowly part ways with. But right now, they're offering a lot of defensive linemen, so that tells me probably around 3 or 4.
Yeah, guys, you want to make sure you're involved in, so you don't have to circle back late and offer late, look like an idiot for offering late. Basically,
100%.
All right, let's get to some reader I always say reader, then I say listener. What I mean is viewer questions. And a couple of things. You mentioned Florida recruiting a kid out of Denellen, and I always want to do this whenever I can. Home to Gator great Ernie Mills, receiver in the late 80s, who also was a fantastic player, a Pro Bowler with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Coral Gables, you mentioned the offer at Coral Gables High, alma mater to the late Frederick Niebuhr, my father, one of my favorite schools in Florida, Coral Gables. But also, Corey, long before we were around, that was a school that used to send a half dozen guys to Florida about every year in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. John Clifford, Glenn Cameron, Ralph Ortega. I believe they were all Coral Gables guys, historic program. Good to see Florida recruiting Coral Gables High.
No, that was more your era. When were you born? 58,
I was born in the 70s. These guys were all playing by then. Okay. But again, it's good to see Florida recruiting in Dade County. And that's why you go get Brandon Harris, your new cornerbacks coach. That's another reason you hire Marcus Davis, your receivers coach. They're going to get Florida some traction down there. And John Summerall's got that kind of energy that's going to make him a formidable recruiter in South Florida. Now, the last staff that really wasn't their area, although the 1 year they signed Ben Hanks, Ty Jackson. They signed 5 guys from down there, but over the 4-year period, there really weren't too many more guys than those 5. All right, so we've got some questions here and some comments. Lucas the Gatorman says, "What's up, my guys? John Summerall seems to have that Stephen Orr Spurrier swagger." Would you agree with that, Corey? I would.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
I think it's more of an Urban Meyer swagger, to be honest with you.
I mean, the dude brims with confidence, man. You see that dude walking around, chest bumping people, just different energy, comfortable with crowd. I love it, man. I think obviously the returns early on to me definitely has that same appearance to me for sure.
I agree. Let me scroll up top here, see if there's any questions here. Dubster, this is early on in the show, says, "Am I the only one saying anything?" You were for a while. Now we've got a bunch of other guys. All right. IW Jake says, "If we land a 5-star, I'm putting 500 on the Georgia game. I think we can beat them this year." Look, they've been getting closer and closer to beating Georgia. And, Corey, this is interesting. Speaking of recruiting, since this is the recruiting show, I did have somebody tell me this weekend they feel like Georgia, for the first time in a while, is a little concerned with what they're seeing in Gainesville from a recruiting standpoint. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. All right, a lot of Go Gators comments. Let's see what else we got. Summerall's the man for the job. I'm just trying to look at this. Good morning, guys. Summerall. Okay. So another Kyle Pitts, IW Jake says, another Kyle Pitts at tight end would be sick. And Aaron Philo, Florida's new quarterback, reminds him of Kyle Trask. What are you seeing? Have you evaluated the tight ends, Florida's, comparing these guys to Kyle Pitts? Have you evaluated any of their film yet? Some of the tight ends you've mentioned, Corey, or are they from the mold of Kyle Pitts? What would you say?
Yeah, I think George Lamons, like I said, it's not often for a kid to have over 1,000 yards receiving as a tight end, as a sophomore or senior. This kid did as a sophomore. So, this kid's been on the radar for a lot of schools for a few years now. He's one of those guys that early in high school started getting a lot of offers, so there's a lot of buzz with him. But, man, just over the last 2 seasons, almost 1,700 yards receiving, very fluid, a guy that you can kind of flex out, I should say, put in the slot. You can move him all around. it's kind of hard. I mean, as far as comparing to Kyle Pitts, they do have a similar style, a guy that's
Okay.
more of a receiving tight end. And I think that's fine this cycle because they need more athleticism in the tight end room. They have a lot of more inline blockers, a lot more physical guys. So Amir Jackson comes back. There's still a lot to be shown from him, but I still think even after him, you need to bring in a lot more better athletes. And I think he fits that mold.
All right. Rob says, I don't want a 5-star QB out of high school. We can double back when he goes in the portal a year from now. You know what? I don't disagree with this point because, and David Davidson, by the way, Florida, one of their top quarterback targets, he may very well end up being a 5-star. I mean, this guy is like a rocket ship to the moon right now. People are just starting to discover him and then realizing he hasn't played football. He's been a baseball guy. He's just getting experience and already doing these great things. But when you sign a 5-star quarterback, you're putting so much NIL money into that. And I you know what I mean? It's tough. I mean, look, you want to sign good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So I agree and disagree at the same time. I think you go look for guys that you think can compete and win. But at what cost? Because again, you're going to pay, let's suppose you pay, a couple $1 million for a guy out of high school. He doesn't play for a couple years because you've got other guys ahead of him. And then by the time he's ready to play, he could just say, all right, I'm going to go to your rival school and make more money. So I don't know how you feel about that, Corey. It's just a weird thing. It's hard to really answer that. Hard to really, if you love a guy, you love a guy. You're going to want him. But you have to set in your head at what cost, not to be 100%. Cheap. Florida's got an NIL money. Listen, we're talking to people behind the scenes that work at Florida, and they're very pleased with the amount of money that they have to work with right now. And I think that should be pointed out. Corey, I interrupted you. Any thoughts on that QB thing?
No, I agree to 100%. I mean, like I said, it depends on the cost. I mean, because every year in the portal, you can get a quality quarterback, especially at a school like Florida. I mean, you're going to attract top quarterbacks regardless. And I mean, unless you're in it, like a guy that, hey, like this guy's a difference maker and we can get him. But if it's a guy that's commanding several million to get him on the roster, yeah. I probably wouldn't go that far. But I think it's a perfect year, like a Davin Davidson. I think he's the perfect type where you might be able to get him at a decent price depending on where his ranking falls. But at the end of the cycle, I think Will Griffin was another one where he wanted to be at Florida last cycle. He's going to be a freshman this year out of Tampa Jesuit. And you probably got him at a good price too. He's a kid who just wanted to be a Gator no matter what. So from my understanding, I don't think they probably broke the bank for getting him on the roster. So I think you got to pick and choose. But I agree. I think the portal is the way to go when it comes to quality quarterbacks.
It's tough. I mean, we're talking about, Miami playing all these portal QBs. Well, they also have to recruit high school guys. You can't just play with one quarterback. So it's tricky, and every school's sort of dealing with this right now. All right. MDF says, over under 4-star offensive lineman in this class. Last question. What do you think, Corey?
I would say
4-star or better.
Yeah, I would say 3. I was leaning towards 4, but I think 3 is more realistic. I think they could definitely get 4 to 5 4-star offensive linemen, but I think 3 is kind of that middle line to kind of be safe. I just think from the Sean Tatums, I mean, he's obviously one that comes to mind. I mean, you have Reed Ramsey up at First Academy in Orlando. There's a lot of guys that Florida's in a good spot with, and those are just a few of the in-state guys. So I think overall, I mean, Maxwell Hiller, we talked about him out of Pennsylvania, the 5-star. He's going to be a little bit more difficult of a pull, but Florida's right there. You have offensive lineman Landon Von Brandt, who's a kid up in, I believe, Delaware, former Penn State commit. That another one that he said, hey, Florida wasn't on my radar, but since Phil Trautwein got there, now they're going to probably get an OV from me. So Florida's really in the mix for a lot of these big name kids, and it kind of goes back to what Phil is telling all these kids on the road. I want the best offensive line class for the 2027 cycle. No ifs or buts about it. That's like his main goal. He wants to have the best class come to Florida, and that shows that they're recruiting the top dude. So I think they definitely get at least 3, but possibly they get more.
Yeah, a non-recruiting question, but I also cover the team, and Corey does too. Dubster says, do we name a QB1 after the spring game or closer to the opener? It's almost always closer to the opener. You've got to keep everybody focused. They'll know the pecking order. Look, the kids will know the pecking order out of spring because the first guy to go out with the first team, do the math here. So they'll kind of have an idea, but I think you want to keep it an open competition as long as possible, but also to the point where you're not you want to make sure the guy who is going to be your number one is getting the maximum amount of number one reps so he can continue to develop chemistry with the guys around him. So a little bit of a, situation that you're trying to balance a couple of things at once, but probably closer to the spring. And look, I feel like the floor of the quarterback room is going to be better this year. We just don't know if the ceiling's going to be better. You hope, obviously. All right. I think that is it, Corey. Let's see here. Let me drop that one out of there. If you like what we're doing, hit the like and subscribe button. We've been trying to do these every week. And then on Friday, Zach Alberverdi and myself do more of a team outlook show. A Gator football, Gator basketball. Is a huge Gator basketball win yesterday, Corey. Talk about an absolute ass kicking. And so anyway, that'll do it for this edition of the Gators Online Recruiting Show. For Corey Bender, I am Keith Niebuhr. We'll be in touch soon. Take care, everybody. Have a good week. Stay warm. You too, Corey. Hang around, Corey. I want to talk to you. Take care, everybody.